Well, good evening and welcome to the pre-show of the Intrepid radio program. I'm your host, Scotty Roberts, because this is my show. And the pre-show, if you don't know, is all just about getting the show set up. And I think we're all set up. All my levels look good. I think the screen looks good. I think my lighting is about as good as it's gonna get. Yeah, that's about as good as it's gonna get right now. And until I hook up all the lights, I got to get them all hooked up and all adjusted and do studio mojo on them. So I think this will work for now. I hope it works for you. It works for me. And that's our show for tonight, the FYRE spirits, their existence and legends. We have talked about the jinn on this show before, but this is from a different angle. It's a different author I've drawn some information from. It's going to be some very interesting stuff. I made it, says Steph. I level been out prepping. I level been out prepping, LOL. Well, I'm glad you made it, and I'm glad you've leveled been out prepping. I level been out prepping. I want to make sure I read that right. Yeah, I think it's just a typo, but there you go. Good to have you here. Those of you who are here and are not in the chat room, come on over. And you can join in the chat during the show, which begins on the radio station at 3 minutes after the top of the hour. This is just the pre-show. It's not really a warm-up, but it's a warm-up. It is now 9:01 and 52 seconds, which means we've got about a minute left. And we go live over on the radio station, Odyssey Radio, ODYSY radio.com. If you don't want to watch the visual and you just want to listen to the show, go over to Odyssey Radio, ODYSY radio.com, just for the audio version of the show in radio format. And you can play it in the background. If you want the visuals, stay here over on the YouTube channel. And see, I've been, damn it, I don't know where level come from. Well, that's where I think we found the source. I've been, damn it, I don't know it where level came from. There you go, Steph. That sorted it all out for me. Hey, Randall Flagg, good to see you as well. We're going to go dark because we're going to come back live in just a few minutes, a few seconds. Stand by. Don't.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. I just want you to know I've been, damn it, I don't know it where level came from. And welcome to the program. There, I got that from Steph. She's my new intro writer for tonight. You can go over to the chat room and see Steph, Cuervo Queen, and others that are starting to gather over there. And welcome to the program, folks. I'm Scotty Roberts. If you don't know that, this is my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY radio.com. You can go on over. You can hear us in audio format only over there. If you'd like to watch the simulcast, come on over to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And join the chat room if you're not there already. Hey, Barbie D over in the chat room. Good to see you. Steph is telling me to stop. Stop. See the hand, Scotty. So I'm stopping, Steph. I'm stopping. And so tonight we're going to talk about a topic that's kind of fun for me. I've done a couple of different series on this topic in the past. And I think the last we addressed this was over a year ago, talking about the jinn a little bit, but this time a little different twist. And I'm going to use the text of an author as a bit of a background material for what we're going to be talking about tonight, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. I think that they are, as much as I talk about biblical things, religious things, Christianity, Judaism, sometimes Islam. I am a firm believer in the Abrahamic religions. I have been a Christian my entire life. I am also what you might call a Christo-pagan, or a pagan Christian. I have some belief systems of my belief systems that fall into paganism, but not into that broad definition of paganism. I have some mystical things that I believe, some Gnostic things that I have incorporated into my beliefs. I also believe that the world is a much bigger place than science defines it today. I believe that there are veils that science cannot pierce. And every time I was looking up this week articles on what are some of the scientific responses to ghosts and the paranormal and hauntings. And I kept coming across, like on Live Science or some of the science channels out there, psychological channels that all try to deal with this stuff by trying to explain it away. Oh, we've got 8 reasons why hauntings and ghosts are really not real entities, but they're figments of your imagination created by this scientific interface with this and that and thus and so on. And what I find is that science, not so much attempting to understand it as they are trying to define the people who have experiences as a little off center, a little weird, a little odd, and that there are probably other reasons for why they see the things they see. And I understand the need for the human mind to do that, because to think about ghosts, spirits, spirit forms of any kind, all of this kind of spiritual stuff out there, you would have to step outside the box of being able to understand something from a scientific point of view. And we don't have to have explanations for everything that exists. Although we strive for that, I want to know why I believe what I believe. I don't know, Barbie D, did you freeze? Are we still going? Or did I freeze? I see you out there, Barbie. So at 9:07 p.m., according to the timestamp. So I want to know things and I want to have scientific explanations, but just because I don't have a scientific explanation doesn't make me immediately, readily, handily, as a default response, knock it off the chart of being something that's real or viable. So it's viable to believe things. I think it is also, I'm going off the top of my head on this. I didn't prep anything for this. It's just where my head's going. Is that we crave the unknown, while at the same time, we are afraid of the unknown and we crave an explanation for it. We want to know why thus is so, why something is happening. Earlier this evening, we ordered some pizza from Domino's for the kids, and Rainey can't eat that stuff anymore. I'm starting to get to the place where I can. But we ordered some chicken wings and pizza, and we turned on Josh Gates, his Expedition X show, where he kind of sits in the office in New York, and that's where they say he is. And he's got those 2 people that are out there that are Steve Kaufman. Hang on a second, folks. Hey Steve, I'm doing live radio right now. Can I call you back? You're gonna be up and around for a while? Yeah, I'm doing live radio right now, Steve.
Oh, come get off the radio. Goodbye.
I'll get off the radio and call you in a little while. You gonna be up late? Oh, I think he's already gone. All right, sorry about that, folks. I just thought Steve is a good friend of mine. He's a good client, a good friend. Known him for about 30 years or more. And he owns, if you're local, he owns the River's Edge here, big inner tubing place. And he's got other business ventures. He and his brothers own the dirt NASCAR track up here, the Cedar Lake Speedway. And he called me earlier this evening about something, and I think just didn't realize I was going live on radio. So I was just going to bring him in live and go, hey, Steve, say hi. But you know what happened? I've got my phone rings, but and it does it by itself. My Star Trek communicator, my communicator, it's a Bluetooth. So when my phone rings, sometimes it picks up the call. So he was talking through this while I was trying to talk through my phone. So there you go. There it is. Sorry. All right. Steph says, I just want validation in front of others from the things I've experienced. Sometimes I want others to see that I'm not crazy. You know, that's Steph, you remind me of my own wife, Rainey. Back 2011 or 12, I was working on the book, and I've told this story before, but if you've heard it before, I was working on my second book for New Page Books, follow-up to the Nephilim book. I was writing a book on the reptilians. And she told me at one point, she said, you know, I've seen things through our window in our bedroom out, and we had this sprawling backyard that had big oak trees in it that went to fields, farmers' fields, and there were houses way over on the other side of that. We were on the end of the block, so there were houses on the sides that looked into all this stuff, but we had that huge, massive backyard with oak trees. And she said, we had a big window in the bedroom, and she said, I was looking out there. She said, Scotty, I saw things out there. She said, I saw beings. Now, you all know Rainey. Rainey's not crazy beyond the normal hot craziness that comes along with hot chicks. And so I said to her, why didn't you tell me that you saw this stuff? Why didn't you wake me up? She said, well, I didn't want you to think I was crazy. I said, honey, you're not going to make me think you're crazy. This is what we do. We're in the crazy realm with the books I write, with the ghost investigations, with the radio show, with all the stuff we're involved in. I said, we're into crazy together. And so, Steph, I know what you mean about wanting somebody to validate what you see and experience so you don't feel crazy. I think that's kind of the way Rainey was. And she has no bones talking about it, but she used to be more afraid of talking about it because she didn't want people to think she was nuts. I think you try to process it yourself like I did. She said, see what I saw, is what Steph just said over in the chat room. And yeah, that's true. That's the truth. You want people to understand what you've seen. That little clip I play of Uncle Dave talking. Now, he wasn't Uncle Dave to me. He was Uncle Dave to the show, as you all know. Uncle Dave to my 6 kids for the last 30 years. So I refer to him that way. But when he was talking on the Spirit Box, I know that was his voice. I know what his voice sounds like. I'm not an idiot. I'm not a crazy person. I don't need to make shit up in order to impress people or to convince myself. I'm already convinced because I've experienced. But you want people to know. And Steph just says, I don't care anymore. I say what I saw because it's what I saw or heard or felt. Exactly it. And Field Guy says, fire spirits, are we talking about women? Fire spirits, are we talking about women? No, we're talking about Steph and Rainey specifically as 2 women that say, I just want people to understand what I've experienced. I do too. That's why I do this show. That's why I write the books I write. That's why we're engaged in this stuff, is to say, look, even if I'm wrong about some things, I am sharing my experiences with you. Now, there is one experience I have not had so far as I know. and that is encounter with the jinn. And I've talked about the jinn a couple of times on this show, at least trying to define who they were and so on. And I don't think I really crave a meeting face to face with the jinn, just like I don't crave a meeting face to face with a ghost unless it's on my terms. You know, it's got to be daylight. We've got to be sitting out on the patio, having a cigar, a snifter of brandy or something, good scotch, and a ghost could appear in the chair next to me and go, "Hey, you wanted to talk? Here I am. Hey." And I'd be like, "Oof, dude, that's a lot, but the sun's shining. We've got cigars and scotch. Can you smoke one? Can you drink a scotch with me? You're a ghost." So those are my terms, something like that. Same with a jinn. I don't want a jinn appearing to me and scaring the shit out of me. I don't want to piss my sheets at night. I want, if I'm going to have that experience, I want that experience on a one-on-one, a one-to-one, not some superior, supernatural, frightening, scary ass bitch being appearing and scaring the shit out of me. That's not what I want. I want a one-on-one. If I'm going to have it, let's do a one-on-one. I want to talk to you. I want to find out who you are. And then I don't want you to destroy me afterwards or turn me into a newt because that pleases you. I want to, a level playing field, neutral. Hey, meet me. I'll talk to you. Even if you're strange and weird in that way of weird that I don't understand you and you're so much different than I am, different kind of being and so on, that doesn't mean I don't want to experience who you are and understand you. What did you say, field guy? U.S. Grant and his ghost. His ghost, you can supposedly smell cigar smoke and brandy from his aura, so they say. And that's pretty typical in hauntings, that you get these residual effects of the people that are haunting whatever place it's in. Steph says, I only want a gin in a slow gin fizz. LOL. You're talking GIN. So, yeah, I get that. Fire spirits, field guy, are the. I understand why you were asking. I was making fun of you making fun. Fire spirits are what they say jinn are. That they are made of the element of fire, and that's how they were created. And so they're fire beings or fire spirits. And so we've talked about their origins before, but I want to get into a little bit more of an understanding about who they are. Who are these guys? These men and women? They're actually male and female. Jinn and a Jinnaya, I think it's pronounced. And I'm looking at a book that is by Robert Lebling. I've been reading this book. And he's lived and worked as a journalist in Egypt, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom with the United States, and he's the author of several books. And he wrote this book, this particular book. He wrote Legends of the Fire Spirits, Jinn and the Genies from Arabia to Zanzibar by Robert Lebling. And so I've drawn a lot of material from his book. And he talks about their origins. He talks about historical encounters. He talks about the deeds of the jinn behavior, all kinds of things like that. So I want to talk and I put it under that category, all kinds of things like that, because there's a whole list of things that he covers in his book. And there is a foreword by Tahir Shah. Pardon me, I got to take a drink. It's just sugar-free 7-Up. Nothing substantive. So, I want to read the entire foreword by Tahir Shah. out of his book. We've got plenty of time to do it. It's going to take 5 to 10 minutes. But I want you to hear how he introduces this book about the jinn. He says this. He says, "Ago, I moved from a cramped London flat into a sprawling Moroccan mansion, set squarely in the middle of a Casablanca shantytown. Looking back, it was a relocation touched by lunacy, but it was all the more unwise because the house was said to be infested with jinn. The Occidental world, Occidental with a capital O, the Occidental world has never found it easy to grasp the strange netherworld of spirits that followers of Islam universally believe exist in a realm overlaid by our own." Now, this is an important introduction to I think we're going to be talking about here. So bend an ear to this stuff as you're chatting in the chat room. Listen to some of this. He's just saying, typical people don't really grasp the strange netherworld of spirits. And this is what Steph was talking about. Why do people think she might be nuts or crazy, and my wife think that people might think she is, or so on? I've grown like Steph. I don't care what people think of me to a certain degree. I don't want them to think I'm a putz or anything. And some of that, even you just go, whatever, I don't really care. But I don't want them to think I'm nuts. I want them to know that I think things through and that I do apply a certain scientific method to what I think. But he says the Occidental world has never found it easy to grasp the strange netherworld of spirits that followers of Islam universally believe exist in a realm overlaid by our own. Although descended from an Oriental family with its roots in the mountain fortress of Afghanistan's Hindu Kush, I was born and brought up in the West. This is the Tahir Shah who was writing this forward. He says, I thought I knew the East. I was well accustomed from childhood to understand the finer points of Arab etiquette, and I had been taught in its tales gleaned from Alf Layla wa Layla, the 1001 Nights. That fabulous treasury of stories had introduced me early on to the extraordinary possibilities of a world peopled by invisible legions of jinn. So when we came to live here at Dar Khalifa, the caliph's house, I felt as if nothing could surprise me. How wrong I was. From the first moment that we crossed the threshold, I realized that I was way out of my depth. The house had been empty for almost a decade. I just got a chill that ran right up the backs of my arms. If you're listening, maybe you got that too. I realized that I was way out of my depth. The house had been empty for almost a decade, whereas in the West, an empty home might appeal to squatters. In the East, there is a danger of quite a different kind. The unlawful occupants of our new home were not human, but superhuman. The guardians who came with the house, as if through some medieval right sale, warned us from the outset that there was an extreme danger all around. When I declared that we would be moving into the house right away to supervise the renovations, they laughed nervously, that is, until they realized I was serious. Terrified, contorted expressions then swept across their faces, and they begged us to leave. The jinn would not take kindly to intruders, they told me, for in the years that the house had been empty, it had become their home. Dare to trespass and they might kill us, the leader of the guardians declared. Irritated yet willing to go along for the sake of respecting local sensitivities, I asked what to do. The chief guardian, whose name was Osman, swept out his arms wide and yelled, "You must hold an exorcism!" Back in London, I would have had no idea where to find an exorcist, let alone a troop of them. But Morocco is very different. It may be perched in Africa's northwest corner, just 8 miles from the gates of Europe at Gibraltar, but in many ways, it's the deepest, darkest Orient. And that is what is so appealing about it. I asked around and very soon found myself in the old imperial city of Meknes. According to all my informants, it was the center of exorcists, and they were right. A few minutes after my arrival, I was offered dozens of exorcists from the Isawa Brotherhood. I was offered dozens of exorcists from the Isawa Brotherhood. I negotiated a price for 20, and the exorcist dealer threw in a further 4 of them for free. You buy 20, I give you 4 for free. The only catch was that I obliged to pay in advance. A day or so later, I arrived home and was greeted by the guardian's long looks. The jinn were already exacting their revenge, they told me. A dead cat had been found in the garden with its head cut off. A tree had fallen in the wind and broken a window. And the maid hired to look after our little baby had run off screaming for no reason at all. I held out a hand at arm's length and whispered confidently, "The exorcists are coming." The guardians perked up. They asked when exactly the visitors would arrive. I shrugged. "They'll come when they're ready," I said. My wife said that I was mad to have handed over wads of money to exorcists I didn't know. She said she could hear them all the way in Meknes, howling with laughter. A day passed, then another. I kicked myself for having been so ingenious as to pay in advance, but then at that moment, I heard the wild whooping sound of men in high spirits against a backdrop of grinding noise. A huge cement truck inched its way down our lane. On the back were riding the exorcists, as if on some infernal chariot. I pointed at them and grinned, and the guardians grinned too. Through days and nights, the exorcists wreaked their terrible work. They slaughtered and skinned a goat at what they said was the heart of the house. As the person obliged to purchase the animal, I found myself naturally interested in how its execution would feature in the cleansing of my home of supernatural elements. When stripped of its skin, the carcass was beheaded and its gallbladder swallowed by one of the exorcists. The others slid open its belly, rifled through the organs, which gleamed like jewels in the candlelight. One of the group poured milk in all corners of the house, and another did the same with blood. Drumbeat and high-pitched homemade oboes wailed. The drumming became faster and faster as the night wore on, and as it did so, the exorcists stepped into another plane, a kind of twilight zone of their own imagination. They cut their wrists with knives, drank their own blood, and then collapsed on the ground in trance. Yet more exorcists massed in a dark, damp room at the far end of the house. They barricaded themselves inside, killed chickens, and drank more blood. And all the while the drums beat and the oboes shrieked out. I wondered whether the walls would tumble down as they had done in Jericho. There's our segue to the Moses story from the other night, by the way. I whispered sternly to the leader of the exorcists that they could leave. He laughed a wild, hearty laugh, and I swear his eyes flashed red with fire. He would quit our home, he said, only when the jinn had been sucked out of the walls and swallowed. I explained that my wife was growing impatient and that she was uncomfortable at having the walls and floor strewn with freshly purged blood. The leader of the exorcists caught my glance in his. Widening his eyes in the most terrifying manner, he told me that he had never been in a house so consumed with evil spirits. Right, Randall Flagg? He says in the chat room. They call that a cleansing? I think that's what Tahir Shah was getting at. So then he asked for more money and for another goat. The next day, after brokering a deal which involved a handful of crisp 100 dirham notes, the exorcists clambered aboard the cement truck. They rolled back down the lane and through the shanty town to the open road. My wife gave me one of those looks that instilled pure fear. I bragged out loud that the house was now squeaky clean. Do you remember the Poltergeist movie? This house is clean. And that the last thing we ever needed to worry about again was the prospect of being tormented by jinn. That was all 6 years ago. In the weeks and months since, I have found myself living in a country where the belief in these normally invisible spirits is complete and unshakable. Jinn are described in the Quran and are part of life for all God-fearing Muslims in Morocco and across the Islamic world. The Quran tells us that when God created man from clay, he created a second race of beings. This is for you, field guy. When God created man from clay, he created a second race of beings, jinn, from smokeless fire. Jinn are not ghosts. That is, they're not spirits of the dead. Far from it. They are living entities just like us. They are born, they get married, they die like humans. Some are good and others are bad. Some are ugly while others are radiantly beautiful. Indeed, there are many tales of mortal men being wooed by the charms of voluptuous women, only to realize later that they're not human, but jinn. The difference between us and them is that they have magical powers and can decide whether to be visible or not. They can fly through the air, they can change their form, and are capable of magical feats. The 19th century's fascination with the Arabian Nights saw the deeds and misdeeds of jinn enter Victorian drawing rooms. The creatures slipped into Western communal folklore through the tales of Aladdin, Sinbad, and others, mixed in with epic quests, treasures, flying carpets, and enchanted lands. And through the endless adaptations for children and all the Hollywood renditions, jinn became known to us all. But gone was the Oriental imagery, the sly, ferocious race that lives among us, replaced by a comic jubilee of towering yet quiet, lovable creatures who go by the name of genies. Anyone who has spent any time in the Arab world knows the difference between Hollywood's depiction and that which is found embedded deep in local culture. Remember, I told you this story a couple of times in context to other shows. When I was in Egypt with my friends John and Maria at their site of Gebel El Silsila archaeological site, our dig house was on a boat, a dahabeah, moored at the Speas of Horemheb. And one day, one of the Egyptian workers came in running off of the rocky shoreline, the hills and the shoreline, which was actually the entryway to the Sahara Desert on the west side of the Nile. He came running in, up the little gangplank, and down into the hold of the ship, screaming the whole way that he had seen a jinn in the hillside and was going for safety in the hold of the ship. That word spread like wildfire, and pretty soon every single Egyptian worker on that archaeological site had made their way quickly up the gangplank and down into the hold of the ship, where they sat for the rest of the day and all night long smoking shisha and not going on shore till the dawn of the next morning, because somebody had seen a jinn in the hillside. Now, one might think, oh, what an ingenious way to get out of a day's work. Except that's not what it was. These are true believers and experiencers. So anyone who's spent any time in the Arab world knows the difference between Hollywood's depiction and that which is found embedded deep in local culture. Living in a country like Morocco, where belief in jinn is all pervasive, involves experiencing situations such as the ones we faced at the caliph's house. It brings an extraordinary level of cultural possibility that simply does not exist in the Occidental world. Imagine that all around me and me, that there might be living spirits, invisible spirits, sitting, standing, laughing, chatting, cackling, crouching on the floor. Some of them are minute, while others tower hundreds of feet into the air. The more you think about it and live with it, the more appealing the idea of jinn becomes. And the longer you live in a place where everyone believes, the more you find yourself believing too. Imagine that all the things that you do during your day being observed by the spirit world. It's interesting, even in biblical text, it says that in the book of Hebrews, it talks about seeing as we are encircled about or encompassed about, it says, by a great amount of witnesses, those who have gone on before us in the spirit world, let us make terms with God in this sense. That's what this author is talking about, or this Tahir Shah, who is writing this forward for this book. Long before I moved to Morocco, he continues, I had searched for a readable book about jinn and their world, but there wasn't one. When I asked friends who were scholars in Islamic culture and tradition, they recommended barely readable texts written by academics for academics. Years passed, and through a kind of magic that was from the realm of the jinn themselves, Robert Lebling contacted me out of the blue. He spoke of a work, a great labor of love, which would reveal to the West all it needed to know about the jinn. My prayers had been answered. The boundaries of Lebling's Legends of the Fire Spirits surpassed my wildest dreams. The book's scope exceeds simply listing stories of jinn taken from Islamic texts and Arab folklore. Lebling has left no stone unturned in his inquiry, roaming through traditional Eastern literature as well as the modern media in search of anything which gives us a better understanding of jinn and their world. The result is a truly extraordinary masterwork, a treasury within itself that can be consulted at random, dipped into as a bedside book, or read from cover to cover in a fabulous feast for the imagination and the inquiring mind. Through Legends of the Fire Spirits, we learn that the belief in jinn is certainly pre-Islamic, and that there are various distinct forms of these creatures. The Quran devotes an entire surah to them, a form of life that is inextricably linked to the cultural and religious tapestry of Arab and Islamic lands. Lebling details clearly how followers of Islam perceive the realm of the jinn, what the Prophet Muhammad said about them, and how regional and geographic divide has shaped them within local culture. An entire section is devoted to the study and appreciation of jinn by geographic location. Through Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Arabia and Palestine, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, as well as through Nigeria, Malaysia, Zanzibar, and beyond. We learn that the Arabic word for crazy, majnun, if I'm pronouncing that right, Majnun, majnun, comes from the same root word as the word jinn, suggesting that a deranged person is possessed in some way. We also learn that jinn are believed to lurk in wells and lavatories, in addition to their haunting empty buildings, such as our home. Space is given to King Solomon, the one human who can control jinn through the magical ring that he wore. And Lebling describes the extraordinary encounters between those of us created from clay and others who were shaped from smokeless fire. These include examples of humans who unwittingly married jinn, and others such as the 14th century Morocco magician Muhammad ibn al-Hajj al-Tilimsani, whose work Sons of Light, S-U-N-S, of Lights and Treasures of Secrets, provides a spell for anyone wishing to seduce the daughter of the White King of the Jinn. Legends of the Fire Spirits provides a window into Arab and Islamic society that is usually clouded over, opaque to all except Arabists and scholars of Islam. The subject is one known to Muslims embracing belief that stands at the heart of the Islamic faith, but one that until now has been largely misrepresented and misunderstood in the West. As someone who lives with the daily possibility of jinn spotting, says Tahir Shah, I would urge everyone wishing a deeper understanding of Arab society and culture to make careful use of legends of the fire spirits. To anyone considering the purchase of a haunted home in Morocco or elsewhere in the region, this book will become an indispensable handbook in the months and years to come. As for life at the Caliph's house, all is not well. One of the guardians recently almost severed his hand while sharpening an axe in the garden. Then just last week, the maid tripped and cut her foot badly, and on the same day, the swimming pool turned an eerie shade of yellow. The guardians have been imploring me to hold another exorcism. The very thought of it fills me with worry. Most of all, I don't know how on earth I'd break it to my wife. But as all my friends assure me, everyone knows that even the best exorcism has to be renewed once in a while. And that was the foreword to the book written by Tahir Shah, Dar Khalifa Casablanca. And he wrote that in 2010, so that was 14 years ago. But and it was the foreword for this book that was written by Robert Lebling, Legends of the Fire Spirits, Jinn and Genies from Arabia to Zanzibar. And so I thought that introduction to a book it's actually a foreword. It's not the author's introduction. But I thought that was a very interesting way to introduce getting into this topic a little deeper than we had in the past. And the book is something I'm going to draw a lot of information from for the precise reasons that Shaw said it was good to have on your nightstand or good as a reference book in learning more about these things. And there was a little poem written by Victor Hugo called Les Djinns, which you can imagine means the jinn. It says, the swarm of jinn is passing, and it whirls hissing. Old conifers stirred by their flight, crackle like burning pine. Their herd heavy and swift, flying in the vacant space, seems a livid cloud with lightning flashing at its edges. So there is a certain drama and fire and power of these fire spirits that we call genies or jinn, as presented in the literature of the worlds of the literatures of the world that are enough to take our breath away. These beings are mysterious. They're frightening. They cause humankind endless grief. And yet there's a spark of goodness among them as well. They can help as well as hinder. It's like think of the good people, the Fae of Ireland and Celtic lore. They can be incredibly devastating creatures. They can be what seems to be cruel and dark and malevolent, while at the same time, incredibly benevolent, incredibly giving, incredibly loving. I think this is the kind of creature you have when you're looking at the jinn. Readers in the West shake their heads in amazement. as they read the tales, and some wonder, could such creatures actually exist? Could the jinn actually exist? Let me ask you in the chat room, those of you listening, can the jinn actually exist? Chuck Thurston just said, I know a coworker at Lockheed Martin who is sure she has a domovoy in her apartment. From all of the description and antics it does, I'd have to believe her. And it looks out for her. And it does pranks. What exactly is a domovoy? That's actually a word I don't even use very often. I'm going to look that word up. A domovoy, usually represented as an old gray-haired man with flashing eyes. He might manifest in the form of an animal, such as a cat or a dog or a bear. It's a household spirit in folklore and mythology. That's something I don't talk about much because I've never really encountered that much. It's Slavic mythology. It's a household spirit that appears under various names and having its origin in ancestor worship. A domovoy dwells in any number of places in each home, near the oven, under the doorstep, in the hearth of the fireplace. He never goes out beyond the boundaries of the household. And he's a guardian of the family and its wealth, but he's partial to conscientious and hardworking people. And any displeasure the domovoy feels with the actions of its family is displayed in troubles with the farm animals or in strange knocks and grating noises in the house. These last, I just got a big chill on that because what immediately went through my mind, there are a couple of times in the past where Rainey and I have gotten into knockdown, drag-out arguments, and we hear a big slam of a door or the big bam on the wall right behind me. Things like that. And I mean, coinciding perfectly with I just recently told this tale of Rainey and I were arguing in the garage. She turned in a huff, went up the one step and into the kitchen door and slammed the door. And within a few seconds, I heard wham on the wall and the whole house shook. And I thought she threw something at the door or the wall. And I opened the door and I said, hey. And I called her name and she's all the way in the back of the house. And I said, did you just throw something at the wall? No, she said. So, there are things like that. And you wonder sometimes as you look at some of these things we experience in day-to-day life, are there mystical, spiritual answers to it? Or are we just a bunch of idiot superstitionists that would believe such? But the domovoy is very interesting. That's an interesting point that you bring up. So, Chuck, I'm sorry. And it steals her spoons and her bras anytime he's annoyed. Just like an old man will do. So, PK phenomena? PK. PK, the only term that comes to mind is preacher's kid. You mean something else. PK phenomena. Steph says, oh my God, I had a door slam right in front of us. It was freaky, scary, yet beautifully amazing. Yeah, both incidents immediately stopped our fight. Rainey and I were fighting, spitting sticks and twigs and nails at each other. And we heard the big slam and we both went, oh, did you hear that? And we snuck upstairs to find out where it came from. Psychokinetic. Duh, Sarah. Of course, psychokinetic. And these are beings that exist. Imagine this species, an intelligent species of beings that secretly lives among us. Imagine that they often appear as humans, or even as humanoid or as humans. But they possess amazing powers that we lack. They can change their shapes. They can fly through the air and even render themselves invisible. That's pretty extraordinary stuff. They watch us. They study us. They react to us. Occasionally, they abduct humans and even mate with them. producing hybrid offspring. In today's North America and Europe, such creatures are discussed in all seriousness by many people. They're called aliens or greys. In the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, beings that fit this description are called jinn. So many in the West are unwilling to concede the existence of jinn, which is their Arabic name. And this reluctance is grounded partly in a rationalist tradition, which rejects the existence of almost anything that cannot be seen or experienced otherwise, though science does admit the existence of the infrared and ultraviolet light spectra, despite the fact that these things can't be detected by the human eye. Additionally, in our culture's collective experience, the anecdotal evidence for this phenomena is quite sparse. Very few of us have ever claimed to have seen a jinn. How many of you here believe that you've encountered jinn? I don't think they're extraterrestrials either, Sarah, as she says over in the chat room. I think there's a comparison that's being made where they call them the greys and extraterrestrials. Perhaps they are the jinn. Many in Western cultures refuse to admit that jinn even exist because they're viewed as an element of fantasy literature, an imaginative Arabian Nights creation that has entertained children for generations, but has no basis in fact. This is the way we treat the fae. They're fairy tales. They're Victorian winged creatures that don't exist. That's what we've learned about them. Aladdin's magic lamp is a storyteller's figment, not a part of our concrete world. So when Westerners conjure up a mental picture of a genie, if I told you all now, think of a genie, what are you going to get in mind? If it's not Robin Williams playing an animated blue genie, it's of course Barbara Eden in harem pants from the old TV series I Dream a Genie. And I got to tell you, you don't know how many days in the back of your mind, of your rational mind, is that irrational part that says, man, I'd love to stumble on a bottle and open it up and have somebody that looks like a scantily clad Barbara Eden call me master and want to be mine forever. I'd be like, yo, how you doing? So it may come as a surprise to many in the West to learn that jinn are taken seriously and are regarded as real, tangible beings by a large segment of the world's population. There's millions of people in North Africa, millions. The Middle East and the other Islamic regions have been brought up to consider jinn as normal, natural parts of the world around them. Admittedly, this belief it's eroded somewhat as educated elites in Muslim countries, influenced by Western thought, have come to view the jinn as essentially a spiritual or even metaphorical concept. But Muslims committed to the literal truth of the Quran as the word of Allah, conveyed to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel, dare not reject the notion of jinn entirely. The Quran describes jinn as actual, intelligent life forms, beings that, through some, though different than humans, share some attributes with them. Jinn populate the world with offspring. They too are male and female and raise families. They possess free will. They make choices in life. They accept or reject God. Some become renegades and are classified as demons or ghouls. Others practice established religions and live what humans would consider conventional, normal lives among their own kind. Jinn generally kept to their own communities, but they also on occasion interact with humans, sometimes emotionally or sexually, and in positive or negative ways. So these interactions can occur haphazardly or unavoidably when the worlds of jinn and humans touch and intersect, sometimes collide. They can also happen when jinn make a conscious decision to seek out, contact, or confront human beings. In the Arab and Islamic worlds, jinn haunt abandoned houses, crumbling ruins, as Sarah said in the chat room, kind of dirty, dark places. They inhabit caves and sewers, sinkholes, wander through deserts, guard hidden or buried treasures, take the form of snakes and other beasts, possess humans, perform wonders at the bidding of magicians. But what many seem to be jinn activity, what may seem to be jinn activity, isn't always so. Even those who believe firmly in jinn concede that swindlers, grifters, and scammers often use this belief to manipulate the guileless and defraud the innocent. According to Islamic tradition, God created angels from light, humans from clay, and jinn from smokeless fire. Jinn, a word derived from an Arabic root meaning to conceal or cover with darkness, are said to have the ability to hide themselves from humans, often by disguising themselves as animals, such as snakes, dogs, cats. Many jinn listened to the teachings of the Prophet, found them persuasive, and became Muslims. Various local traditions, including those in Palestine and Arabia, also recognize the existence of Christian and Jewish jinn. In some countries, such as the Maldives or Indonesia, jinn are said to adopt sometimes other faiths, such as Buddhism and Hinduism. There's so much more. I want to get more into this. Even though we talked about the jinn a couple of other times on this show, I think there's some really interesting things to uncover and talk about. But we're out of time on the radio show. Oh, look, I left this banner up the whole time. Sorry about that, guys. I got into talking and I totally forgot about it. Those of you watching the show. So, radio audience, we got to let you go. We're going to go into the captain's cabin over at the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. You can come and join us, join in the chat, maybe even put your own 2 cents worth in. And for now, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the show. And we'll be back on probably Sunday morning, unless I might be out of town. We'll see. Till then, live long and prosper.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep.
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, welcome to the captain's cabin, everyone. I don't know how long we'll go tonight. We'll just see where the conversation takes us. But for those of you who don't know, the captain's cabin is the sort of afterglow that comes after the show. And it just gives us a chance to talk a little bit if we want to and expand on some of the things, or sometimes it takes a dramatically different turn. We end up talking about things that are totally different from the topic. But I think this is a great topic. You notice there are certain topics that I will repeat over the years. And one of them is the jinn. I've done a little mini series, 5 to 6 episodes twice on the jinn, talking about them. And it caught my attention again this week as something that I really wanted to bring up again, because I think it's like talking about God. It's a topic that some people will speak about over and over and over again. Religious faith, or whatever goes on in the world, history, politics. To me, this is an interesting topic because it is one of those unknown topics, excuse me, that is it's curiosity. It's constantly glowing embers of curiosity. There, like I say, I'm two sides of one coin. The one side says, I would love to experience a jinn. I would love to meet one. I would love to talk to one. But the other side of the coin says, I don't want to have the shit scared out of me, and I don't want to encounter something that's going to leave me with PTSD the rest of my life. I'd like to experience one on neutral ground. I'd love to be able to, by that I mean, sit and converse and talk and enjoy each other's company or learn about each other. And according to a lot of what I read about them, they are also beings that you cannot always distinguish from humans. We might be living among, they might be our neighbors, the jinn. I want to bring Sarah in. She's been sitting out there. And Field Guy, I see you. I'll bring you in a minute here. Sarah, welcome. And I just wanted to tap your brain a little bit on that.
Hey, Scotty.
The possibility that we're already surrounded with these creatures, that we may know some and don't even know we know some.
Well, the thing is about the jinn is that, even if you don't go by the label of jinn, if you look at the list of descriptors like you were talking about earlier, most of the major cultures all over the world, they have some version of it. Like it can apply to changelings, it can apply to fae, it can apply to what Chuck Thurston was talking about in the chat room about the Domovoy, which is Russian. Yes. It's all sort of like different names trying to explain a similar type of phenomenon, which is interesting to me because it's like similar groupings. You see repetitive patterns. It's like you were talking about earlier, trying to link up a jinn with aliens. I mean,
Yeah.
It was that. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch for me.
I don't
because,
think
you
they
know,
are
I'm a
aliens.
I mean, I'm definitely a believer in jinn. I've even heard of cases and it was involved in a couple cases for, you know, consulting and all that. But I
Well,
mean,
what was you? I'm curious. And by the way, welcome to Field Guy and to Jason. Sarah, what was your experience in aiding or helping in situations? Did
well, I
you
mean, it was
then?
more of a it was more of a advice giving sort of experience. I wasn't experiencing like in the house or anything like that.
Okay, so it wasn't
Because
like, and I met these Jinn firsthand, and we talked.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's more. I mean, if you go back, some people do see it as superstition. I mean, there is that double-edged sword of, you know, actually experiencing phenomenon versus the superstition of it. Like, say, if you lived in a remote village in the mountains, or you know, somewhere that had little access, and all of a sudden, you know, in an area where it's all, you know, dark-haired people with brown eyes, you see somebody had a blue-eyed baby. They would say,
Right,
"Oh,"
right. Oh,
you
where'd
know,
he come from?
they might have, you know, mated with the jinn, or you know,
Or the mailman?
yeah, yeah, or the, you know, the, the
Right,
guy with
right,
the jalebi cart. So I mean,
right.
the sweets cart. So I mean, there is, you know, also a superstitious aspect of it, which, you know, that kind of translates to other areas as well, in the same way that people have superstitions about fairies, you know, not to, you know, piss them off, you know,
Yes, yes,
otherwise you
yes.
might end up with bad luck or something
And that's it.
bad
You
happening
know,
to you.
you don't want to cross that invisible line that you don't know is even there. When I
Right.
say I want to encounter, I want to have an experience, I want to meet a jinn, I have shaman friends who are very well. What's the word I'm looking for? They're very well reputed as shaman, and they would say, "You don't want to mess with the jinn." Well, no, I don't want to mess with the jinn. It's like saying, "I want to
Don't
meet
poke the
God."
bear, basically. Don't poke the
Right,
tiger. It's like,
right, right.
why invite
Don't poke
something into
him.
your life? Which, you know, it's also a very Christian concept, you know, of
Yeah,
inviting in attachments and all that. I mean,
and I'm
there
not looking
are,
for
you know,
attachments. I'm not looking for anything to infest my home with evil, and nothing like that. But it's like even with the Fae, what do they say about the fairy folk? They can they can do dastardly deeds, and they can bless your home.
right.
It all depends on that's the folklore behind the Fae and fairies, and so jinn.
So
If they
the
can
one
exist
thing
as
I want to
beings,
also bring up is, you know, jinn in in some ways they're very similar to humans in that they
yeah,
have free will. They
right,
can perform acts of good, acts of evil.
and they can marry and have offspring.
Yeah, I mean,
That's pretty wild.
it's like dealing with a total stranger. As far as, you know, they could you know, bless you with good will, or, you know, curse you with bad will, or um, it's, and again, it's the whole idea of being open and inviting stuff into your life. I mean, and as far as, you know, in dealing with jinn, uh, I guess for the Western culture, that in the easiest text, which may or may not, is be just look at what happens in 1001 Arabian Nights, because
Hmm.
that's also, you know, immersed a lot with jinn culture. You know, you have the story of Aladdin and Sinbad, and you know, all that stuff.
Right.
Um, but in the jinn world, you know, it has a lot of similarities to Christianity, such as Solomon. You know, Muslims believe in Solomon. They believe that you know, like the idea of capturing a jinn or binding a jinn to a jar or a lamp or whatever, you could, you know, seal it with the seal of Solomon, with, you know, a piece of
Hmm.
clay and the seal of Solomon, and you know, bind them to,
Bottled up gin until
yeah, and
somebody
then
lets them out.
you know, that which could be like a form of punishment, or you know,
Right.
depending on what's going on. So because and then again, remember before Islam, jinn these types of entities existed, and in pre-Islamic Arabia they have their own ways of dealing with them, whether it's through talismanic work or whatever, invoking other stronger entities such as the local god, or whatever they believed in.
I hear tonic water is actually really good for dealing with jinn.
Tonic water? What is tonic water?
Tonic water. I hadn't heard that. Oh, you're talking gin and tonic.
Oh,
there it is.
Okay.
There it is.
I had to get
I
back
don't drink,
on
so that went way over my head.
I was way over on this path, running a perpendicular path.
I figured you probably didn't drink, Sarah.
Sometimes I wish I did, but it's
that's
cultural.
Understandable.
I thought you were bringing up some obscure Western belief on how to rid your household of gin sprinkled tonic water around.
No, it's just tonic and some crushed ice and maybe some lime.
And love to his tonic and gin.
I mean, in some ways, I guess in pagan or Christian cultures, could you consider guardian spirits gin? I mean, they could sort of perform the same function, or depending on what your belief in the if you believe in the everyday demonic versus the demonic.
Well, a guardian angel, I would see the jinn. Obviously, I don't think you're making a direct correlation, but it would seem that guardian angels would be something that's appointed. They are appointed to be somebody's guardian, as opposed to jinn who might take on a role like that voluntarily, because.
Well, I mean, if it's a righteous jinn or a good jinn, it could be like, God asks us, hey, can you go over there and take care of this for me? As far as
right,
asking people.
See, that's one of those things that when you start looking at the cross-cultural kind of stuff, that's one of those things that kind of leads me back to my whole thought process. And I think I've mentioned this before, probably ages ago on here in conversation with you, Scotty, but there are so many similarities and there are so many common themes between cultures, between various faiths, etc., that just goes back to my, what if we all just have a slice of the bigger pie?
Right.
Like our understanding culturally of everything, we're all talking about the same stuff, but because of cultural influence, regional influence,
names,
we have different names, different thoughts about them, but there's always kind of those commonalities that seem to string their way through all of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I get that.
It's, we live in a sea of energy. It's ethereum and materium, as Professor Bauer says.
Careful,
so,
careful.
Of course,
don't say his name 2 more times. Yeah.
It's not like the sea is dead. You have all sorts of life in it at different levels. So
right.
Very true. I had Scotty, when you and I met, the gal that I was seeing who actually got me the tickets as a present to go to the Otasaga thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
New York, Cooperstown.
Right. Yeah. So she had been an Arabic linguist in the Army.
Oh.
And then when her and I met, she was an interpreter manager. And she had some Iraqis that she worked with that she was thinking about getting a tattoo. I forget why she had it placed at the base of her neck. I think it had something to do with like not being snuck up on, but she got basically a J that had very kind of Arabic underpinnings to how it was done stylistically, and it was J for jinn.
All right.
And there was something about there's something in the story of it too, that with one of the Terps, one of the interpreters, couldn't pronounce something or couldn't say something. and ended up calling her Jinn
Yeah, yeah.
because the J, and
Yes.
her name was Jess. And I just thought of that because we're talking about Jen. That popped into my head. Sort of a side quest there.
Yeah. Well, I think they're interesting creatures from the aspect that I don't understand them fully.
Yeah.
That they are not just, at least from a Judeo-Christian point of view, they're not just another biblical spirit being. They're
Right.
something
Well,
different.
wonder if they're kind of the well, okay, so we had the Nephilim, right? Which I'm not firing on all 12 cylinders right now.
All right.
The Nephilim, those were the offspring of angels and human, right? Or was the
Well, if you look at them as angels, yeah, I don't think they were angels. Some scholars contend they were, but the Watchers were angels.
Right. So I wonder if there's
for different beings altogether.
Wonder if there's a kind of a parallel there, since they could interact with humans, they could mate with humans, they could do all of that.
Yeah.
But then again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier with we're all talking about the same thing, just from a different cultural perspective.
Well, I know, by the way, I should say, according to many biblical scholars, angels are sexless. They cannot reproduce.
Right.
So who were these beings that came down and intermingled with the daughters of men and had children by them? Well, then by that theological point of view, they were not angels. I don't think they were angels because they weren't called angels. They were called something different.
Yeah.
So could the jinn play into that? I don't know. The Bible itself, as far as I know, unless it's veiled and it's used, they speak of them in different languages or words or descriptors. Doesn't talk about jinn.
No, it doesn't.
So.
Well, I mean, in terms of the Bible, I think of the Book of Tobit. The whole story of what's his name?
Which is not a canonical book, so
yeah,
doesn't appear in the English Bible.
Right. I mean, the traditional, but pre-Council of Nicaea.
Right.
Apocryphal text.
Yeah.
It's an apocryphal text, yeah. If it was not booted completely. So,
I always like seeing them included in the Bible, though. You'll get some that have that apocryphal text.
Why do a bunch of guys get to decide what's scripture and what isn't? It's like, what if it was left up to we four right here? Okay, what's scripture and what isn't?
Well, I'm gonna go. I'll be back. Get a snack. You guys decide. I'm not determining the fate of humanity.
Yeah.
It seems like the Bible after Council of Nicaea is like, okay, it's very simplified, and you take out like all the things that they thought were not absurd, but I mean not relevant. It's like they took out all the superheroes out of the comic book, basically.
Right.
Kind
of what they did.
Yeah. So I mean, just as in the Greek cultures, you have demigods, or people who were people but have excessive strength or weird superpowers and all that. So.
Yeah. That's like I say, the apocryphal books are the Bible on crack. So, Field Guy, what do you got on your mind? What's going on, man? You've been here quiet the whole time.
Well, I don't like to interrupt people when they're talking, so I just kind of sit to the side.
Well, I don't either, but did you know that? No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't know a lot of things. That's what people keep telling me lately. You don't know anything, man. Yeah, I honestly did not know what fire spirits meant. That's why I asked earlier, because I'm like, okay, I thought it. Usually when you associate fire, you associate women with passion, and boom, you put them together. And I don't know. That's what I just, wasn't really too much joking about it, but I was like, well, it made no sense.
Burned. So, I normally don't think of women and fire in the same context, unless I contextualize them together. She's hot. She's fire.
I don't know. They're always yelling at me, so.
Oh, okay.
You're always yelling.
Well, there is that saying that, The least common denominator in every situation is you. So
Well, considering I work with mostly women, I can't get a word in edgewise there either.
But I mean, speaking of
That's a
fire,
stereotype.
yeah. Speaking of fire in itself, I mean, fire is not. There are other forms of entities as well. I mean, there are wind
Yeah.
devils, there are water spirits. You know, there's things of the earth. I mean,
Right.
it's not just fiery fire spirits that exist. In
Well,
you know,
of course, fire spirits in the context of,
I
as
mean,
they
jinn,
say, the
yes,
creation of the jinn was smokeless fire.
smokeless fire. Yeah.
So
wait, so does that mean potentially going off of that, there could be a correlation between Jinn and the burning bush?
Possible.
There could be a correlation. There could be
Started
a
burning
correlation made.
No, correlation does not equal causation. So
No.
Yeah.
So it's just flame and flame you got there. There's the common denominator there. So, what are you drinking over there, field guy? From
What
the
I usually
front,
drink?
because of the shape of the label, it almost looked like a flat
Body
bourbon.
Armor. It's the Joe Burrow's edition, Orange Mango.
Orange mango, Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Well, cheers.
I drink it every so often. You know, I bought it
I'm just
today and went to the store. I was like,
sugar.
I didn't run my errands yesterday because I didn't feel like going anywhere on my birthday.
happy birthday.
It's your birthday?
It was yesterday.
Well, happy
Happy
birthday a
birthday.
day late. I didn't know that.
That's okay. Only 6 people on Facebook actually knew.
Oh,
That's why I made a comment. I said, every year it's less and less people.
wow.
But,
Survived another year. That's something to celebrate.
yeah. Well, one of my bosses passed away. My former boss, he passed away about a week and a half ago. He used to be a trainer in hot hockey, and he worked with the Astros organization for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years. And because I hadn't been talking to him lately, and I'm like, I haven't seen him in a while. What's going on? And I saw a post where he passed away. And,
Well, there you go.
no, my birthday is never in March. It's in February. 222.
Wait, what is hot hockey?
Hockey.
It sounded like you said hot hockey.
No, hockey. Like NHL hockey.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Used to be the head trainer. Yeah, he used to be the head trainer of the Buffalo Sabres and in the 80s and a couple other teams.
See, I thought you said hot hockey, and I was like, is this some sort of weird combination of hot yoga and hockey? And how does that even work?
We don't have hockey
in a
down here.
icy room.
Yoga, I don't know.
That's an interesting story, Chuck Thurston, by the way. He said, I know a cave in Nevada that has a spirit in it that I will never, ever go back to. I like my skin on my body. He made it very clear to keep it secret and never come back.
Where is this cave? I will go there.
If I had a spirit tell me, keep it secret and don't ever come back, or I'll peel your skin off your body. If I had a spirit actually saying that to me, I think I'd probably not reveal the location of the cave. By the way, here is the one picture you've all seen before. That
Invisible Man.
I had my shaman friend, David Weatherly. And I don't want to misquote him, but he pretty much said to me that he thought this was jinn. I could very well have encountered a jinn here.
Where?
And, well, he's over. Can you see my... No, you can't see my mouse. Look,
It's in
way
the
over
corner.
on the left, the four
To the left, that dark.
the dark figure
Towards the
emerging
middle.
from-
Looks like Gumby,
All the way to the left.
but only black.
Blocks.
He's like Gumby, but only way different.
It looks like an arm sticking out.
It's
Okay.
Here. I've got the
Lower right quadrant.
no, middle, center, left. All
That
the way
black
to the left.
mass.
The black. You'll see a black. What looks like a black shoulder and arm sticking out, emerging from behind the stonework on the far left.
That's some type of spirit.
Tally.
Now, I have a closer up. Many of you have already seen these. I only bring this up because this was the one encounter I had with something where I have been told by a couple of different people that are very good people, you have encountered Djinns. Be very careful. Here is the here's the close-up view, Jason. It's going to load up here. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there was nobody else on this site except John Ward and I, who was wearing a tweed jacket and a fedora. And there were the guardians that were villagers around, and they all wore the light white or light blue or light gray galabeas that went long sleeve, loose garments dropped to the ground.
Yeah.
Here's the close-up of this.
Oh, shit.
And
That's a hand.
It's a hand. Now the interesting thing, I took this picture in, I've told this story before, but I took this picture in 2013. I was at the Hebsed court next to the stepped pyramid of Djoser. And the stepped pyramid would be, if you could expand this photo, up and off to the left.
All right.
Rising right out of the end of this this little courtyard we're in. But so I took this picture. It was actually this photo, and it was 6 years before I saw this figure.
It's digital.
What's that?
Is it digital or film?
It's a digital picture.
Okay.
And I was showing somebody way over on the right here. You see that low stone wall in the back, the low stone wall across the center.
Yeah.
With the long oblong blocks.
Yep.
Follow that line to the other side, and underneath there's a low white stone sitting there, like a sandstone stone.
Okay.
I was sitting there having a smoke when I had that little vision that I've talked about. And I had somebody who was going here and wanted to see these pictures. So I said, look, this is the picture where I was sitting there, and I blew it up and I scanned over and I saw this image for the first time.
Yeah.
That was in, I say 6 years. This was in 2013. This I would have shown her this picture in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah.
So 7 or 8 years later was when I first saw the image of this character. And I said, what the hell is that? And I blew it up. And the interesting thing was, there's no Egyptian that's going to look like that, dressed the way any of the Egyptians that were guardians of this site looked. This is almost topless, like bare-chested, bare-shoulder, dark-skinned like this. So there was that factor. And also the factor that when I had taken this shot, I was standing on a little porch here on the left, and I stepped down and took another shot in that direction, turned around and took one in the other direction. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. But the point I'm making with these is that I was told by people who have the ability to sense these things, I guess you could say, that they were, you know what, Scotty, you've got a jinn there, and so be very careful. This is the. Is this the same shot? Let me take a look. I'm going to load up another shot. I think this is the same shot, only backed out a little further. Let me just double check if this has the figure in it. Yes, it does. So this is the original shot right here.
Okay.
And this is the Hebsed court. The stepped pyramid is just literally off to the left. The corner of it is right there.
Yeah.
So I took this shot from this little porch where I'm standing. There's these cove temples like the one you see in the middle in the background. There's 3 or 4 of them rebuilt on this side of the court as well. And I'm standing like where you see all the little block. It looks like little broken block walls in the darker in front of that cove top ruined temple in the background.
Yeah.
There's all these little dark sections. where you can turn in and go up a step or two, and you're on a porch type of a thing.
Right.
That's where I was on this side. And then I see way in the background here on the left, you can see that low stone wall in the background, and you can see him emerging from there. Then I stepped out from there and took another shot, just a contextual shot, looking down the aisle, and there was nothing else there. And
Do you have this? Do you have this photo with that area zoomed in?
Yeah, this photo is also this photo.
Okay.
And it's also this photo.
Okay, so that's all the
one photo with this figure in it.
Got it. Okay.
But I have several photos that I took all right there in the same few seconds. I stepped down off of the porch and I took a picture, and there was nobody there. And of course, I didn't see anybody at the time either. So It never occurred to me to be taking pictures of the area just to try to get a picture of this guy again. So here, this is just moments later. I'll load up one more picture. Moments after I took this shot, and here is the original shot right here, with you see this figure emerging behind the stone wall. And by the way, I want you to notice something too. Look at where his feet would be, and look at where ground level is. So he's quite a bit above the ground here.
Yeah.
So here's the original shot. Now I stepped down a step and took this shot, looking in the same direction.
Huh.
And there's nobody there. This, by the way, is the corner. You can see the Cove Top Temple almost in the center, in the background against the blue sky.
Yeah.
You see a bit of the corner of the step pyramid.
Okay.
Right, emerging behind that. So that's right where we were. But this is a shot back in that same direction. I took a step down from where I stood here. I took a step down onto the dirt, walked and turned and took another shot to get the whole shot in of the court, the Hebsed court.
Wish I could zoom in on my phone, but unfortunately I can't.
Yeah, I'll show these to you. I'll send them over to you or something and show them to you a little larger. But there. And Sarah, I know you've talked about these pictures before. You've been here when I've shown them before. So is Field Guy. Oh, he's gone.
Whoa, where'd he
go? Chuck Thurston said, yeah, he's very tall. Yeah, he is. Considering the angle of the light and the shadows, why is he a dark shadow? That's a good question. That's a very good question. Why is he so dark? And this picture, you can tell. I took this and I lightened it up just a little bit back here. And I did the lightening to see, could I bring out clothing that I'm not seeing or any more detail by lightening that image. And I really couldn't. So, Sarah, in context to speaking of the jinn, what do you think?
I mean, it's always a possibility, but I mean, even in most jinn stories, they are said to interact with human beings, or we may interact with them in more common basis than what we think. It's not like we're always going to see, the genie from Aladdin. As the jinn shows up.
The exit there. Here. Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like with everything else in the paranormal, it's a difference between possible and probable.
Yes.
So I mean, both. It's both in this case. It's probable and also very possible. So
yeah,
because there's nothing that can be actually refuted. Absolutely,
there's no way to. With this thing in particular, there's no way to prove or disprove it. You're just going to have somebody who doesn't believe that that's what it is going to say, well, that's obviously not a ghost or a spirit or something. It's something completely different.
Well, and that's why I asked if this was a digital image or if you had originally taken it on film.
Right.
Because if it was film, there could have been contamination of the film surface. There could have been double exposure. There could have been a problem in processing that, could have led to that anomaly on there. And so that was kind of an effort to rule
Right.
things out
Right.
because, that's scientific process.
Right. So yeah, and how do you know? You don't really know. That's the thing. There's no way to tell for sure what we're actually looking at here. So,
Right.
other than it's the figure of a person, we think.
Well, I mean, the main thing is that you don't take, even if you have this in front of you, you don't take it at face value.
Right.
It's good to question it. And some people will look at it with faith. Some people will look at it with more questions. And both are valid.
Yeah.
And, there's no shame in either.
Right. Exactly.
Well,
So,
and really, you should, even if you're looking at it from a position of faith, there's nothing wrong with trying to break things down scientifically or explain things,
Right.
because you're just trying to understand it, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's why God gave us the inquisitive, thought-capable, analysis-capable brains.
Yes, I
Or
agree.
at least with most of us, anyway.
Well, I mean, it's like that saying, God gave us a brain. Yeah, I think He's hoping for us to use it.
Right.
I'm hoping we'll use it.
Yeah, exactly.
I tend to think that God has left an awful lot for us to discover.
I do not appreciate the fact that God seems to have somehow worked a interesting miss on my number 4, number 8, and number 12 cylinders when speaking about the brain.
Oh, for this evening, you mean? Yes.
In general.
By the way, this is the Hebsed Court. I can't point to things here, but if you look way at the bottom left, vantage point while taking the photo, that's about where I was standing.
Okay.
I was looking to the right. Approximate position of the figure was there.
Mm-hmm.
The spot where I had been sitting earlier was there. Now, this Hebsed Court, that all fits into, you see the shaded area pointing up. That's the Hebsed Court in the upper image, right at the corner of the stepped pyramid.
Got it. Yeah.
That's where this all took place. And if you remember, and Chuck Thurston says his clothing is bands of tight-fitting wraps. It has color, but it's made dark, which I can honestly say, Chuck, now I don't know everything, but not anybody I saw there was dressed that way.
You don't wear dark in the desert.
No. And there was only a few people there the whole time we were there. It was
tight-fitting wraps. Is it Mumra?
Mumra.
Thundercats reference. I'm a nerd.
And the interesting thing is, I took this picture because of what I refer to as the vision I had when I was there.
Mm.
And I was sitting, if you look at this picture, right dead center, just a little bit to the right. I was sitting on a long stone there, having a cigarette, and just contemplating this place.
As one does in the desert.
As one does in the desert, in ruins. And I know you've all heard this story before. I'm going to tell it again briefly. I was sitting, and suddenly the whole scene changed in front of my eyes. As the Apostle Paul wrote, speaking of his vision, he says, "Whether I was in body or in spirit, I know not." No. So I don't know exactly what happened. I'm sitting there. Everything shifted. I saw this courtyard from the other end where I was sitting. It was completely cleared out. There was none of the rubble in the middle. All these coved top temples that you see along the left and the one ruined one at the right, they were actually built up, as you can see in this diagram. They were all along this side and a couple of them over on this side as well. You can see these up here in the upper image, these cove top temples. They were all side by side, a dozen of them back there. So I saw the courtyard as it would have looked pristine and new 4,000 years ago. And the sun was lower in the sky. It was coming from what would be in this picture you're looking at from the left, casting long shadows of these cove top temples down onto about the middle of the court. And at the top of these cove top temples, each one had what looked like to be like a 6 to 8 foot pole that was a torch lit at the end, sticking out of each one of these like a flagpole, almost horizontal flagpole. And they were all burning. I could feel breeze. I could smell incense. I could hear chanting. And coming up this courtyard, it would be like this path you're looking at right in the middle of this picture. On the other side were a line of priests coming toward me, sitting at the far end. And they were chanting. They were all bald, bare-chested, white kilts. And they had these trays full of what looked like canopic jars, things like that. And they chanted, and in almost military fashion, starting with the first and then the second when he got to that spot and the third, they turned to the left and they started walking toward one of these cove temples there. And in the midst of all that, I could feel the breeze. The sun was low in the sky, the torches, I could smell the incense, hear the chanting, see the priests. And I blinked and it was all back to this. It was all back to normal. And I got tears in my eyes just flooded with tears. You know, the kind of tears you get, not of sadness or emotion, but one of getting such severe chills run up your back or your body. My whole body got that chill and my eyes just watered up and I went, what the fuck was that? I remember saying out loud, it's echoing down this. And John says, "What's up, brother?" And I said, "You won't believe me." And so that is the experience I had. And I thought it was really significant, but didn't know the significance of it. So
what did John say?
Well, he said, "Well, brother, there's lots of emotional things." Now John has one foot in this world anyway. And he was just trying to play it. Well, brother, these things happen sometimes. You have to think about it. And we'll talk about it later. And, you know, and he's been around all this stuff and seen this kind of stuff. So that's when I walked over to the other side and I took a picture of where I was sitting, which is dead set in the middle of this picture. That's why I took this picture. And then what's sitting there is this guy emerging from the stonework. So, then it was, go ahead, Sarah.
No, I mean, if you consider the context, I mean, it could possibly be a jinn, but you could also consider, and you were talking about, you had a vision of, you know, like a processional, doing a ritual. So why not look to the Egyptian culture? It could be something of somebody's car body. You know,
see, and I thought about that too. It's interesting. There's two other things connected with this. One is later, about a week later, John and I were in Luxor, and I had that experience at the tomb of Senenmut, which I've talked. That was the same trip. That experience at Senenmut where we went to see the tomb of Senenmut. Senenmut is this bust of this guy back here over my shoulder. He's the guy I think was the historical Moses. Yeah. We're at his tomb outside the temple of Hatshepsut's Diyar el-Bahri in Luxor. And we're at his tomb and we were going to go get coffee and John said, "We're going to go ahead of you. We'll meet you up at the coffee shop." And so they walked up the rough-hewn stairs out of this little grotto where this tomb was. And that's where I had that vision. It's like this was a trip. I'd never had a vision before. I had what happened here at Saqqara, and then I had that vision. And it was where and it wasn't really a vision. It was a experience. It was, and you've heard the story before, but I was standing there and I said out loud, I said, "So I'm lighting a cigarette as I'm doing this. and I had my metal Bic lighter, clink, and I'm lighting a cigarette, and I go, so, Son and Mut, are you actually Moses? And I said, Moses, are you actually Son and Mut? Did you really exist the way we think you did? And then it was, boom, like out of left field, something, just an energy, it just hits me. And I drop my cigarette in the sand, and I'm weeping, and it's rolling off my face, and I'm flailing my arms once again, yelling out loud, what the fuck just happened? What was that? And that stuck with me. That was a really rugged moment, and from the sense that I didn't know what was happening. And I had all kinds of little residual things that happened after that. When I got back home, things at John and Maria's house, and so on. I had the year later, Chris Conway, our medium friend from Scotland, not a medium friend. He was a friend who was a medium, and he was here. And I said, I sat on this stone right here last year. And I said, do you get anything off of this site? What do you feel? Do you feel, before I tell you what happened here? And he was like, he said, this was Chris. He said, now, Chris, you may recognize him from, if you ever watched the show Most Haunted, the British show with all the screaming chicks.
Mm-hmm.
He was the medium, one of the mediums they brought in to replace when they canned Derek Acora, and they brought in other mediums. Well, he came in for a couple of seasons, and then he left. I said, well, Chris, why did you leave? He goes, I had some problems, he says, with the production. But Chris is a genuine guy, and a dear friend. And so he's sitting there, and I said, something happened to me here last year. And he says, well, I'll tell you this, what I'm getting right away, he says, is an ancient man. He says, somebody about 3,000, 3,500 years ago. He says, he won't give me his name. He says he will not give me his name until he knows he can trust you. And he said, he is drawn to you. He said, this is Chris, he says he's drawn to you because you think the way he thinks. And he likes your thinking. And he was a physician, he said, or something he named off a few things. And he said kind of in a pharaonic court or noble court, but he had a role of importance of some kind. The first thing Chris had said to me, by the way, he said, yeah, I got this ancient man. And he says with his little Scottish accent, and he says, and he's naked. And I go, oh, great. I said, I have the great Chris Conway here, detecting entities around me, and you found a naked man that's 3,000 years old. And he goes, well, he's not really naked. He says he might be wearing a nappy, which is a diaper, Great Britain.
Right.
I said, what's worse, a naked man or a naked man with a nappy on? And I said, you think maybe a loincloth? And he says, that's probably what it is. And but he said, he'll only be attached to you when you are in Egypt. He said he will not leave Egypt, and which was I found very interesting. And I found myself both times I was in Egypt, 2 or 3 times after this trip, where I called out to him. I said, if you're here. And of course, this was the second trip. This was the year after. And Chris said, he said all these things about this guy. Then it was later in the week. We were again at Hatshepsut's temple. This is the year later now. And Chris says, I've got your man is here again. He says, this time he says he's wearing a robe. And he described him, and he's offering you this very large, he says about the size of a tea saucer. He says it's a ruby with gilt gold around the edge. And he's holding it out to you and asking you to take it. And I said, what the hell does that mean? He says, I don't know. I said, I'm just telling you what I see. And he says, he's giving you his name. And he gave this name. And he even spelled it out. We were doing like not a Ouija board, but he wrote a bunch of letters on paper and little cup and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was different. It was different. We were using hieroglyphic signs as well. But suffice it to say, John Ward is a member, has been in the past, of the Hermetic Order of Luxor. And it was a revival of an older group that was in activity during ancient times, then revived again in Victorian times, now again in modern day. And yeah, that's that. I don't know about the hair, Chuck Thurston, but dark, skinny man with loincloth. And so Chris said, told John, I said, tell John what you just saw. And we're at Diyar el-Bahri now, Hatshepsut's temple, Tomb of Senemet again. And he told him, and John's eyes went wide, and he says, he offered you the ruby? And I said, what is the article in front of ruby? What is the ruby? And John said, well, and what finally came out of that was the guy who during Victorian age had revived the Hermetic Order of Thebes had as a symbol for the group a big ruby that was gilt around the edges with gold. And he had not told me this. He says, you shouldn't know that. And he says, that ruby was lost. He says, he went back. He was ousted out of Egypt because this was the turnover, the cusp of when the old explorers into the new laws for archaeology and taking artifacts and stuff. And so he left Egypt, a couple of ships, one ship shipwrecked on the way. And in it was a lot of his belongings in crates, including this ruby. It's said to have been lost in that shipwreck. And there have been people wanting to find this for the last 100 years. And he says, and he offered it to you? And then Chris says, and he gave me his name. And John was like a little skeptical. He says, and what was his name? Chris says, I don't know how to pronounce it. Halakalaka. And John, again, his eyes went wide, and he goes, and he repeats it only the way it should have been said. He says, you shouldn't know that name. Nobody should know that name. And Chris said, this is what I got. And so there were these weird happenings all around. And then there was the one time back home here, and I've told this story, I know, before. But John and Rocky and I were going to investigate ghost hunt, if you will, in the plain vernacular, a little house in South Minneapolis. Rocky said, this place is full of spirits. I've been here many times. He says, if you guys, while I'm driving here, down the freeway, he says, if you want to say a prayer of protection or something to God, so we had a moment, a couple minutes where we were all quiet. And in my mind, I said, I envisioned this guy at the Hebstead court. And I said, I don't know who you are really, what the extent of who you are is. I don't know what you do. According to Chris, you won't leave Egypt ever. I said, but if you can hear me from here, do you have the ability to place any protection around me? And I felt silly while I was doing it in my head, I got to tell you. But what I got, and you may remember this part of the story if you've heard me tell it before, I'm sitting in the car going down the freeway, and I feel like the statues where they would show a pharaonic figure and a small head of like his son, the prince, and his arms around him, wrapped around him. And I felt, I'm getting chills going up the backs of my arms right now. I felt the chin on my head and arms around my shoulders. And tangibly felt it. And I was like, wow, that'll do. And it was crazy. But this is the kind of thing that happened after my encounter with it. Now, I told all this to David Weatherly, who is the shaman I spoke with, and he said, "Just be very careful." He says, I detect jinn, but I'm not certain of it. He said, "Just be really careful how you proceed." Chuck Thurston over here says, "Ach tu muntekara." Ach tu muntekara. I have no idea. He says, "Best I can type it." He says he's getting visions himself while we're talking about this. He says, "Yes, I know that sounds like bullshit." It doesn't, Chuck. I don't dissuade or detract from anybody on this stuff anymore with all the stuff you've experienced. So,
have you had any dreams since then involving this entity?
I've had no dreams that I can recall of this man. Nothing like that. I've had waking experiences, not ever seeing the man, but in talking about him and seeing things happen, things shift position in my room. I was talking to two guys on there. I don't even remember who they were. It was way back in 2016, maybe. Late night show. We were done at 2 a.m, and we talked till 4 a.m. after the show because I didn't give this full story. And he said, oh, and I hadn't even seen these pictures. It was not long after I found these pictures. So it might have been later than that. But we were talking, and I'm sitting at the desk in the garage. I had a table out there that was my desk I'd go out to in the daytime so I could smoke while I work. And I had all kinds of papers over here and folders and junk that I'm working on. And while we're talking out in the garage there, now it could be a million different things that you can explain it away with. But as we're talking about this, I told these guys, I said, this is the first I've really vocalized this stuff to anybody. And we're talking about it, and I'm hearing tapping on the walls. And I said, we're talking on video, and I said, did you? They said, we heard that. I actually walked outside the garage and looked to see if anything was out there. Then I'm talking away a little bit more, and a whole stack of papers, not precariously placed so they would fall, a whole stack of papers shifts and moves to a different place on the desk alongside me. And I caught it out of the corner of my eye, and I looked, and they said, what happened? What you looking at? They said, and I said, you aren't going to believe this. And so that kind of stuff, I've experienced that, you know, the bangs on the walls, the different things, the different things that nothing malevolent has ever happened. It's always been like things that make you something. It's that answer to something's trying to make you understand that it's there. Mm-hmm. Now, is it this guy who said he would never leave Egypt? But he also said he would never give me his name until he trusted me. So I don't know anymore. I just don't know. I want to go back to Egypt. I want to go back here and sit at this site and talk to him and say, are you the one that's been doing this? So on, so on, so on, so on. And of course, those of you who don't know the whole story, the whole scene in Luxor with the crying and all of that, that relates back to Philip Coppens. Those of you who don't know the story, that Philip was on the show Ancient Aliens. You may remember him, long, brown, curly hair, Belgian dude. And he had written the foreword for my book, Secret History of the Reptilians. And then he came to the Paradigm Symposium and spoke the first one, 2012. And that was in October of that year. And then he passed away, December. He had a quick illness, angiosarcoma. angiocarcinoma, I'm sorry, cancer of the heart. And he was gone in 2 months.
Jesus.
And I remember when I got the news, it was December 30th, and I was leaving for Egypt January 7th or 10th or something like that.
Mm.
And I got that news, and I stood in the garage in front of my computer weeping. I just broke out into weeping. And it's like I had never cried for anybody who had ever died. And I thought, again, what came to my mind was the what the fuck, why am I crying like this? It's not like he was a relative. It's not like we were best buddies. And this went on for days. I could not overcome it. And I've told this story. Those of you who've heard it, just brush it off or say goodnight. But Micah Hanks, a good friend of mine, was up visiting. It was for Christmas and New Year's. And he and Rainey were actually, after about 4 days of this, were considering calling someone or taking me in somewhere to find out what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And, I could not break it. And then it was same person I've already mentioned tonight, David Weatherly, friend of mine who's a shaman, great author. He calls me up out of the blue, like day 4. And he said, Scotty, you remember when I've told you how I get messages from spirit? He says, it's in a song I'll hear or a book I read, or he says, sometimes I just get an audible message, speak and say whatever message it's giving. He says, 10 minutes ago, I'm sitting here in my office and I heard a voice say, call Scotty. He says, here I am. He says, do I need to know something? What's going on? And right away, I broke again. And I said, here's what's going on. And we talked for a bit, and he gave no real solutions. The one solution that I remember, and then everything kind of went back to normal after this. He said, you're going to Egypt in about a week or 10 days. And he says, it's your first time there. He says, all I am going to tell you that I am getting on the wind, so to speak, he says, is you're going to go and something's going to happen to you that is going to change your life forever. Keep your eyes open and your mind open, because you're going to experience something you've never experienced before. And it's going to change you. And I got to tell you, he was spot on with that.
Yeah.
And so I know many of you who are listening, well, the few who are left tonight, that you've heard that story before, but and you two may have as well.
Actually, I haven't heard this story. So
this is all these things were connected.
Yeah.
The Saqqara presence, the presence at Diyar al-Bahri, Senenmut's tomb, the presence in the car, and by the way, it was Philip Coffin's widow who I spoke with about a month after I got home from Egypt. And I said, I never talked to you about how I felt after Philip passed. And this is about 2 months after the fact now. And because I was in Egypt for a month, and then I was home about a month, and I talked to her. And I invited her to speak in his stead the next year. And that's why I called her, and I called her to talk to her and express my sympathies for the first time. And she said, well, thank you for telling me that. She said, did I ever tell you? She said, when we met you at the Paradigm Symposium in October, we told you that we were going to be in Luxor about the same time you were going over to visit John. And she said, you know why we were going? We were writing a book together on the love affair between Hatshepsut, the Pharaoh queen, and Senenmut. The guy that I'm writing about is Moses. and whose tomb I was at with that experience. And she said, when did this happen to you when you were in Egypt, in Luxor? And I picked up my journal. I got it. It's written in my journal. And I said it was on this date. I think it was February 4th, 2013. And she kind of gave me that gaping jaw sound over the phone. And she said, do you know what happened to me that very same day? She said, I was in Scotland leading a tour that Philip and I were supposed to lead to some sites there. And his brother came and filled in for him. And she said, we were sitting in the hotel room having coffee about 12:30 in the afternoon when Philip appeared right in front of us visually and moved a coffee cup on the table and disappeared.
Huh.
And she said, did you know that Philip believed he was a reincarnation of Senenmut? I said, I did not know that.
Huh.
And so here I was at the tomb of Senenmut at the same time of day, the same day, and had this experience at the tomb.
Yeah.
And it was Maria who had a vision of her own. Maria, John's wife, who is the PhD from Lund University in Sweden, the absolute scholar's scholar. She is the mission director of the Gebel El Silsila archaeological site. And she said to me, she said, do you know what, Scotty? She said, in Sweden, she said, here in Egypt, she said, I'm a scholar and an academic. She said, back home in Sweden, I'm a witch. And she says, I cross both these lines, but I don't let them meet for obvious reasons. And she said she had a little vision. They both called me on Skype at the time, about 2 weeks after I had left Egypt. And she said, John is like, Scotty, Maria had a vision and she must tell you about this. And he told me that she said that she had a vision of a little girl who was holding out her hand and saying, you're on the right path, you just haven't taken my hand. And there was something with Chris Conway and this guy in Egypt that was, you just have to take his hand.
Yeah. And
so all of these things started melding together without any real answers given.
Right.
And I remember one of the last nights I was in Luxor before flying home. I was at John and Maria's house. In the middle of the night, I heard wafting on the air through the window, I heard what sounded like somebody playing music on a little wooden flute. And this was, they lived in the backwater of Luxor on the west bank. You walked from the little village portion. There's all the temples and the city portion were on the east bank. We were on the west bank. And there was a little marketplace in the downtown area, which was not a downtown area. Think of third world downtown.
Right.
And you walked back. It took us about 15 minutes to walk back to their house from there, from the river's edge. And so they were back in the sticks kind of. And I heard this flute music. Don't know any significance to it other than I told John and Maria, and John would teased me mercilessly. Oh, you heard flute music. He says, nobody plays flute around here. And he says, that's absurd. And, you know, he was laughing at me. But he knows as well as I do, there's weird stuff out there. And it was during this call where it was either this call or another one very close to it. And he says, Scotty, he's got me on Skype. I heard your flute music, and so did Maria. And he said it was the middle of the night, and we heard this flute music being played, and we walked outside. We couldn't tell where it was coming from. They're not surrounded by buildings, and there's, what you would consider, for lack of a better term, medieval peasantry lived around them.
Right.
And so they couldn't find a source. And that's the only time they've heard it.
Huh.
And so it was interesting. So all kinds of mystical things. Is this jinn? Is this spirit beings? Is it yes to all of the above? Is it weirdness? Is it? I don't believe for a minute that it's fake or that it's not real.
Right.
So, Kalina says it's first for her hearing these stories too.
Sometimes,
and Kalina, if you haven't been looking, this was if you look at the screen, that's the figure. So
sometimes you talk about, weirdness in the area and things like that. And, sometimes you have to kind of wonder, and this isn't to undermine anything you said. This is more of just a, situational kind of thing. But, you go to places, you go to ancient places, and I mean like truly ancient places. And if you have to wonder when you go to these places, if you know anything about their past, how much does that influence things unconsciously?
Right.
And I say that because so like when I was in Afghanistan the first time in 2010, 2011, I had done a good bit of reading on things, trying to understand where I was going, trying to understand about the people, because, I just kind of had this feeling that I was probably going to, I need to pay attention to this stuff more so than when I went to Iraq. So I kind of read up some and things like that. But like, sometimes you go to a place and you just, the place feels.
Yes.
Ancient.
Yes.
And when I got out to Cop Whitehorse, which is a little small place on the edge of Mazar-e Sharif, and you actually had this really great view of the mountains in the distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of had, for me anyway, kind of had the sense of how ancient it was, how everything kind of came before it, all of the stuff, like there's an energy. And then, I always kind of wondered, like, what am I going to run into out here?
Right.
What am I, because like, I tend to be a bit of a night owl. And I was especially one out there. And, I'd find myself, sitting out on the concrete T-wall barriers that we had surrounding our buildings and stuff like that, and kind of looking off into the distance, late at night. And, it was one of those things that, like, being there, it's like, since time immemorial, in memoriam, that great powerful civilizations have basically come there and found ruin on some sort of level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was just something in the air. You understood that, like, it was tangible. And it's one of those things where it's like, how much of what I am feeling as I'm sitting out here smoking my pipe and just taking in the environment around me is like, everything that I had read and studied, playing subconsciously on me and influencing things.
Yes.
And how much of it is, the actual, just like the land, like there is a tangible ancientness to that area.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's like that in other places, especially like, you go to like Egypt and you're surrounded by ruins. I mean, you can definitely, it's really tangible at that point, obviously. But, it's Alexander the Great had come to, had been in Afghanistan, the Romans had come there, the Mongols, and then, the British later on, and, and it's like everybody kind of hit a spot here and things kind of unraveled on some level.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's like it's just like you can tell.
Yes.
Do you think part of that is because of a lack of industrialization that you would see in like America or Europe or Eastern Europe and all that it's, you know, seems to remain relatively either untouched or just, you know, worked around and supported through local culture?
I am sure that there is certainly that aspect to it. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, but there is also something though that it's like I could feel through the soles of my boots.
Mm.
Like, you know, and then to make it even more weird,
Make it weird.
There was, and this isn't a paranormal thing as much as it is just like a wow. Talk about a weird juxtaposition. You know. There in the distance, still on the outskirts of Mazar-e Sharif, but more towards the direction of the mountains from where I was at Cop Whitehorse, there was like basically a fair style, like a county or state fair style kind of amusement park kind of place with a Ferris wheel and a tilt-a-whirl and all that stuff. And like they would just have the lights on. And so here you are, you're like, here I am sitting in the middle of this ancient land where all of these, you know, all of these great and powerful nations and armies have come and and failed miserably. And
you're at a carnival.
Right. And on top of that, I'm sitting here in the middle of a war zone. There's a fucking Ferris wheel just turning off in the distance, and there's a tilt-a-whirl going off in the distance. I mean, so just weird.
That's surreal.
Surreal.
Almost.
It's completely surreal. It's just such, like I said, is a very odd juxtaposition of things, you know, going on. You start thinking about it. And I always try to get like a picture or video of it because some nights you could actually hear people on the rides. If the wind was carrying right, you could actually hear them. You know, as the tilt-a-whirl was going, you're like, what the fuck?
Exactly.
You know, and sometimes we just get out there and we'd stand on the lower ledge of the T-wall so we could look over the sniper veil or over the sniper screen on the chain link fence just to see it and just be like, what on earth are we watching? I mean, kudos on these guys for being able to do this and, you know, let's go have some fun, even though, you know, you're in the middle of a war zone, which, you know, that was a really odd thing to just see and hear. But it's like, at the same time, it's like, even when all this chaos is going on, and it was actually really oddly quiet in Mazar-e Sharif. Like the entire time I was there, the only shot in anger I ever heard fired was at like 1:30 in the morning at a dog.
I'm gonna step over here for a second. I'll be right back.
The only shot in anger I heard fired the entire time I was there was like at 1:30 in the morning, and it was somebody taking a pot shot at a dog somewhere in the distance that wouldn't stop barking. Like, you know, it was just oddly quiet, oddly, you know, for the kind of environment that you're in. And then you have all that. And it's just like, this is weird.
Well, was that during the day or in the middle of the night? So, I mean, that will also, you know, make a difference because you don't have people around as much.
Well, which part do you mean?
When you heard the shots.
Oh, that was like at 1:30 in the morning. I was not in a sleeping frame of mind, and I was kind of just wandering around the compound, and you know, it wasn't any bigger than a football field. It was smaller than a football field. So it's not like it was a huge, area, and probably smaller than a soccer pitch.
I mean,
Yeah.
usually in those types of areas, the markets and stuff, they open, late in the evening when, after the midday sun is gone, and most people are active like in the early hours, the night hours, the same.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was milling about, and I was like, well, if I'm going to be up, I'm just going to go check on the guys on watch and just see how they're doing, if they need anything. And, I stopped at our little gate guard guy that we had. And then I walked over to our one little guard tower we had, and, climbed up the steps, and there were like 3 guys up there, and I was just, kind of talking with them, and we were just, oh yeah, this is all going on, we haven't seen anything, not heard anything, blah, blah, blah. That dog won't stop barking though. It's been barking for like an hour, and then boom, no barking. It's like we all looked at each other in the dark, and we're kind of like, all right, well, that solves that. So I'm going to go ahead and
Been there.
Gonna go ahead and just walk on back down to the building, and I don't know, send some emails. It was weird, man. It's weird.
But I hate to imagine the paperwork that's probably involved with that if it was friendly fire.
Oh no, it was nothing like that. It was clearly somewhere in the distance, away from us, but sound carries, especially at night, and it's it was just one of those like, what on earth? Okay. All right. Nobody talked about it again. It was like
never brought up. The dog was never mentioned again.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
All right. That just happened. Yeah.
On that note, it is 11:23, and speaking of dogs, I just had the cat come down here and rub against my leg. It is that time. It's time to call it for tonight.
And
I know it was a show filled with things we've talked about before, but I'm going to talk more on this jinn topic because there's a lot more in this book that I would like to cover because I think it's some very interesting material in there, and it's of interest to me. So I want to talk about it. So we'll do more of that. But in the meantime, I'm going to say goodnight to you two. Sarah, thanks for being here.
All right, thanks, guys.
Very beginning tonight. We'll talk to you soon. Jason, good to see you, brother.
Good seeing you.
You have a good night. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Take her easy.
Right. You
All
too.
right.
Bye-bye. Oh, I got to sneeze. And we'll go out on that. Everybody, thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being part of this. And we're going to get out of here now. So you have a good night. We'll see you maybe Sunday morning. I might be out of town. I might have to go up to Duluth to Andy's book release party. And if I do that, I won't be here. So I'll let you know. Have a good night. Live long and prosper.